Like he denied that those were his items.
And did you read where they were found?
Yeah.
Out the back door,
outside.
right? It's like,
yeah. And that bath mat, all 3 items, the 2 knives and the ice pick, were found on there, or at least the blood pattern to match those were found on that,
yeah.
which indicated maybe he set them down as he was doing something.
Yep. And it's like you throw it out the back door. I mean, you think the police aren't going to check? And so that again, that's why I think he wasn't thinking straight. I think he was exhausted. I think he was on uppers. I think that it was he spontaneously killed her and then either accidentally wounded one of the daughters or he had to get rid of them as witnesses. But then you throw all the murder weapons out the back door. Like, how are you going to explain that? You know, it's like
witnesses, they were asleep.
No, the oldest one actually, they think woke up because of where she was, where some of her blood was.
and her blood was. Yeah. So it definitely to me wasn't
right decision to go ahead and kill the youngest.
Yeah. And it doesn't make, like sense to me, some of the things he did, but it makes sense if you think that it was not a planned murder.
Yeah.
So
Just with our family annihilators that we've been seeing, it's very planned.
yes.
Sure.
Yeah. So he's one that's definitely different.
Instead of drugged up, I think.
No, it was drugged up.
Oh yeah, me too.
So that's what they do here. They start with him, and several things bothered the 30-year-old William Ivory. He was the first Criminal Investigation Division agent. So it's CID in the military on the scene. So let me break down what he noticed. So the first thing he noticed was one single tipped over plant and a top heavy coffee table lying on its side were the only 2 things disturbed in the living room. So if there's a life and death struggle, of course, you're going to have more. So that was kind of weird. Then later, they tried to get the coffee table in the exact position that it was in, and it would never assume that position again because top heavy, it's going to go all the way down. It's not going to lie on its side. And so that bothered him. The second thing that bothered him is of all the blade thrusts that MacDonald fought off, only one tiny single fiber from his pajamas could be found in the living room. Yet dozens were found in the bedroom. What makes it incriminating is several were found underneath Colette. Others were under Kimberly's sheets, and 2 more were in Kristen's room, including one lodged under her fingernail. So MacDonald said he wasn't wearing the top when he went into their rooms.
Right.
I guess the killers did it and then went in there.
Another thing about the living room, they're in the dining room because it's a very, very small apartment. There in the dining room were Valentine cards, and not one of them
was tipped over.
And that theory was tested by a few different people. And
you can fart over in that area and it will blow a card down.
Right.
But anyway, when they were testing that theory, there's numerous people that every time they would run by or struggle, they constantly fell down.
Right.
Yeah, the arrow walking by, that it's just ridiculous.
Yeah. So the third one was the blood evidence. There were, quote, buckets in the bedrooms, but none in the living room. They found one teeny tiny little bitty drop on the hallway steps. It was so small, they couldn't even type it. So at the time, they didn't have any DNA, so they had to go by types. This was so small, they couldn't even do that. They also found MacDonald's glasses by the living room drapes, and they found a single speck on one of the lenses that matched Kristen's.
Yeah.
Not MacDonald's. But he said he wasn't wearing them when he went into her room. So how did that blood get there? The next thing.
The pajamas, he wasn't wearing the glasses.
Right.
Yeah. He tried ridiculous for everything they threw at him.
Then Ivory, CID agent Ivory, found tips of surgical gloves beneath the headboard where pig was written. And they were identical to the supply of gloves that were stored beneath the kitchen sink in the cabinet. And then in that same area on the floor in front of that cabinet were drops of blood that were the same type as MacDonald. And we'll get to the types in a second, but most hippies high on LSD aren't going to have surgical gloves with them. So
Right.
when he wrote pig, the tip tore and dropped and he didn't know it. They also found
Thing about the glove is that they feel that it was in the trash that they got rid of. So they didn't even get to get into the trash.
Oh,
Okay.
They really mess up on numerous things.
They also found the ice pick, a kitchen knife later from their own kitchen, a bloody piece of wood about the size of a baseball bat that were used to kill Colette and her daughters. Every murder weapon came from the house. Also, MacDonald made suspicious statements. He told them three times that he took the knife out of his wife's chest in the 6 weeks following the murders. And that got their suspicions up. Like, why does he keep repeating himself? Their curiosity heightened when tests revealed that the weapon had never been in her chest. So,
What?
Yeah, so the ones that was used, the majority of the stabbings was not the one in her chest. It was a totally different knife.
Oh.
yeah. So
So
again,
did
he's
find
like,
them
he took
outside?
statements.
Both of them, yeah.
Both of them? Yeah.
And then finally, MacDonald hardly had any injuries, considered that he'd been beaten with a piece of wood, stabbed, fighting off his attackers. And then the most serious wound was a clean, small, sharp incision located in the right chest between the 7th and 8th rib, which, by the way, is where you feel the least pain and you suffer the least damage. Is that
Really?
interesting? So only a surgeon would know that. Like, he would know where to find the rib
Mhm.
and stab himself.
And almost immediately, he was instructing them like what was about to happen to him and what to do, like make sure he was saved.
Mm-hmm.
Almost immediately when they got there.
Yeah, and then like on the 911 call, he's all like, you know, we need police, we need MPs, we need ambulances, blah blah, and they're trying to get from him, are you on base or off base? And he's like, well, why would that matter? And then he like runs off,
Do you
leaves the
have to
phone
call?
hanging, and then he comes back and he's like, send, you know, help. And she's like, we got MPs on the way. But he would know why she needs to know that, you
Mhm.
know.
Here's what's jacked up about that is supposedly he finally answered her and she goes, well, you have to call off base or base onto that, and was like, and then he takes off and it's like, why can you not just, I mean, this is an emergency situation. You
Just
help,
get
you
people
take,
there.
yeah, you don't transfer a call or say you need to call them.
And I don't even know if 911 was a thing back then in the 70s. You know, so
No.
they probably weren't trained.
You had to call the police.
Right. They probably weren't trained on what you do, you know, but we do know she transferred them to the MPs, but they were already on the way at that point as well. So, but why didn't he know?
Well, if you get a call, someone's dying, you don't say,
You've got to
Call
call
this
off
number.
base for that.
Right. But here's something that's interesting. He's in the military. He would know who to call. Why did he call that number? So to me, he's trying to buy time because he knows the timelines as a doctor of decay and rigor mortis and all of that stuff. So to me, it's like, did he purposely call the wrong number? You know,
And
so
things that he needed to make sure were right.
Yeah.
Got to have time for that.
now this is, you know, what and Nick and Captain on True Crime Garage said this was like a God thing because MacDonald did not know every single one of his family, including himself had a different type blood,
Right.
which
That's
is
amazing.
extremely rare. Yeah.
Had all four.
So,
Well, that was-
it allowed the agents to reconstruct the crime. So here's what they pieced together. So from the blood evidence, the fight began in the master bedroom. They believe that Colette and MacDonald had gotten into an argument, and they think that Colette hit him first, possibly with a hairbrush. So the weapon is speculation, but that's what they're putting together. So then MacDonald started hitting her with the piece of wood. Now, at first, they said that they thought the piece of wood was used for household chores. Later, it was determined to be a slat from the bed. I'm wondering, like, did it fall out? Because I used to have a bed that had slats, and they would sometimes fall out, but they're like huge. So I'm trying to think of, okay, what? Surely it wasn't one that was like, 5 foot wide.
Well,
It
hippies
looked
aren't
like-
gonna lift the bed to get one.
No, and they showed like where it came from and the size of it. And to me, it didn't look like a slat. It looked like a leg, but they kept saying that it was they may have used slat, but they weren't saying it was the leg, but that's what it looked like to me as far as the size.
Yeah, everywhere I heard it was a bed slat, but in some places it just said it was a piece of wood that was used, that had been laying around because it was recently used for some household chores.
But here's the thing. So
Household
we're thinking about
chores?
slats now.
Under the bed.
Furniture was made differently back then. So I'm wondering if maybe there were smaller slats to give support. in
I
the-
think I was thinking about that. I think one of my old beds was designed like that. You had like 3 really long slats, like on the outside and in the middle, and then smaller ones that went down in between those. So I'm wondering if maybe it was something like that. But they also found Kimberly's brain serum in the doorway. So they believe that she may have been accidentally struck. So when he, swung it to hit her, they're thinking, which the force must have been incredible. I'm not sure I buy that. I mean, I think she might have been accidentally struck, but I don't think that would have produced the serum. I think it probably would have knocked her out. He
Right.
gets Colette incapacitated, and then he goes over there and starts killing her. I'm not sure. I mean, I guess there could be enough force, but to me, it'd be like a backhand. And just from playing tennis, your backhand's never, as strong as forward. So, but he was very strong. He was young. He was a Green Beret. So maybe it could do that on a little girl. It wouldn't surprise me. But that's why they think that he killed the daughters, is because he accidentally injured and probably mortally injured Kimberly. And he thought, well, I might as well finish off the job. So they think that he finished off Colette and then carried Kimberly back to her room and killed her. Then once he was done there, he went into Kristen's room and killed her. But before he could, Colette regained consciousness, stumbled in and threw herself on top of her daughter like any good mommy.
And evidence shows that?
Yeah.
Her blood was found on Kristen's bed covers and on one wall of the bedroom. So that's going to be, the blowback effect.
It's been a while since I've seen read
Yeah.
the book. Yeah.
And then MacDonald killed both of them, finished her off, wrapped his wife's body in a sheet, carried her back to the master bedroom, leaving his bloody footprint on the door on his way out.
Here's the thing about the footprint. No doubt they had evidence where they feel that he could have got that much blood, and it was from the comforter where Colette's blood was kind of puddling in it. And then they feel that he stepped on it as he was putting her in it, carrying her back to the bedroom. But there's only one footprint. I have a hard time with that. It's like you go outside, you have water, mud, whatever. You're going to have residual, not just one. So did he forget to clean the rest of it, or that one up? I would
Maybe. Well, if only one foot, got in part of the blood and then he walks, did any other residual footprint? It just wasn't discernible because most of it was in that one footprint.
there was a lot of blood everywhere. Yeah.
If he had like tons of blood, like he was soaked in his foot, I would see several footprints. But if it was just a little bit because he was trying to avoid it, or maybe he missed cleaning it up.
Yeah, because it looked like enough where you'd see the full footprint.
Go ahead
Yes,
and
you
pull
do.
it up again. I mean, it's a good footprint.
Yeah, so you should have a little left over.
Oh, well, where did I have it? Oh, I know. It was on Google. Okay. It's hard seeing the babies. Okay, right here.
See,
And
that's a good,
and it looks like there might have been something here they're pointing to.
true, left, right,
But
maybe.
that's a pretty good one, so I would think he'd have another one above.
You know, but there
or
was a
something.
lot of blood. So maybe they just thought maybe it was just more blood. But yeah, I was thinking there should be more than just one.
And then here's the ice pick and the knife.
Right.
And then
Another,
here's the knife that was supposedly in her chest that was not
right.
in her chest. So it looks like it was next to their bed. I want to see this infamous piece of wood. Oh, here it is.
Yeah. So I think you're right. It was one that went that way.
Mm.
Well, I
I
had,
showed a picture of it.
I had planks in my bed growing up and they weren't that thick.
Yeah, but that was a long time ago.
Well, in the 60s, right?
So yeah,
I mean.
I did. I had
Oh.
the bed slats were typically flatter, but I
Uh-huh.
did have one bed that had them that was basically square. But I'm just not sure on the piece of wood. But we do know it's a murder weapon, and we know he just threw them out the back door, which is stupid. Okay, so then
Prints on them, right? Or fingerprints
nope.
from the one knife, which
Yeah.
again doesn't make sense.
He wiped them all down.
Yeah.
But
And
he
then he tries to cover it up. So at the time of these murders, like we discussed, Charles Manson and the Manson murders in California, it was all in the news. And agents found a blood smudged March 1970 edition of Esquire in the living room, which they believed inspired him to write pig and make up the chant from the hippie lady and all the other details of four assailants. What's also interesting is that the reason they think that is the bloody fingerprint had one of the girls' blood in it, and it was under the coffee table.
Yeah.
Oh.
So how would the blood get there? So they think that he kills them and he sees that and he's like, oh, that's what I can do. Or he picked it up and looked at it, something, and it was his fingerprint and it was one of his daughter's blood types. So
Interesting thing about the magazine real quick is that they had a friend who came over that evening. He would often come over, and the very first interview, so we're not talking 5-9 years later where it changed, but initially he thought that it was very odd that MacDonald immediately called his attention to that magazine, to that article. I mean, right off the bat, he thought that was odd.
That's interesting. I didn't know that. Yeah. Then also they discovered that he fetched a disposable scalpel blade from a supply he had in the hall closet and carefully stuck himself with it. He then put on the surgical gloves and wrote pig on the headboard and then laid his pajama top on top of his wife's chest. He then called for help with the gloves still on according to the blood pattern, and then threw the evidence out the back door. He then messed up the living room, got rid of the gloves and scalpel blade. Agents aren't sure if he flushed them down the toilet or threw them away because they didn't stop the trash truck, which it goes without saying, the people that handled this case sucked at what they do.
Bad.
Now, to their defense, they probably didn't have a lot of murders like this, and they probably didn't have a lot of family annihilation situations. It's a military base. So I guess we could give them some, leniency there, but it's like, come on.
Well,
I mean,
originally, wasn't it just the MPs? It wasn't an outside.
no, they had the investigative agents, that's what their job is they investigate crime. So, and the Ivory guy, he already suspected things were weird. They just did not secure the scene
At all.
Yeah. And I
It
think
was
even things were stolen, wasn't there? Some things were stolen out of the house.
His wallet by someone that was there in the house.
I thought it was an EMT.
I think you're right. Yeah. Stole his wallet.
Yeah. So that right there, you could be like, see how shady they are? My daughters and my wife are bludgeoned and stabbed to death, and this EMT steals my wallet. Like, of course they're going to frame me for this, So I could see how people would be like, wow, from the start. Now, that was all the cover up. Do you have any more insight into any of like the cover up or anything from what you're reading about that?
You got it all.
Okay, so here's the mistakes that the agents and the police made that I think again made this just the perfect murder for everybody to still be talking about all these years later about him being innocent. So, like we said, they did not seal off the crime scene. 26 people were all over it. Oh, here it is. The ambulance driver stole McDonald's wallet. They lost the blue fiber under Kristen's fingernail, a piece of skin beneath one of Colette's nails. They turned over Colette's body and moved the pajama top. And even the Esquire magazine that had 18 similarities from the Manson murders wasn't realized until several agents had been flipping through the pages for days. They hoped for a confession to cover their mistakes, but 7 weeks later, they were advised MacDonald's of his rights. He didn't confess. He agreed to a polygraph test, but then he changed his mind, and that's when they put him under armed guard.
So also on messing with the crime scene, I believe it was the photographer had to wait around in the flower pot that you had talked about that was on his side. He actually made it upright.
Yep.
And there's a picture of that. The phone, someone put the phone back on the, what do you call that? Receiver. What was that called back then?
Put the receiver
That
back on.
landline situation.
So I guess in the military, they do Article 32s is what they're called. And all the mistakes kicked off, a series of events that caused a lot of confusion, a lot of problems for the prosecutors. So first, it has to be said that MacDonald really freaked people out. And the reason why, his own lawyer, is he had a total lack of affect when he would describe the murders. No emotion whatsoever. And Segal, his first attorney, was so disturbed by his lack of emotion that he had a psychiatrist evaluate him. Now, this is weird. His conclusions were that he had, quote, possibly some latent homosexual conflicts and some narcissistic need to be famous or infamous. He did say that he was, quote, fairly certain MacDonald hadn't killed his family, and that became the centerpiece of his defense. Homosexual conflict? What the heck is he talking about?
Across on a couple of psychiatrists and psychologists that evaluated him.
In the 60s and 70s, though, they went straight to that if you acted out of the norm.
I was wondering because he definitely liked women. So I thought, well, maybe he liked both.
In the 70s, I heard that a lot.
Yeah, and there's a very interesting story when he was a teenager that I immediately thought, oh, there's some weird stuff happening there.
Do tell.
So, man, woman, and son had came to visit, like Jeffrey MacDonald's parents didn't even meet this couple, and immediately liked Jeffrey and his brother Jay, his older brother Jay. They had dinner. They went out and had dinner. Then they offered Jeffrey to come and stay with, or offered Jeffrey, they lived in Texas, offered for him to come and stay with them a couple of weeks. He was in high school. He ended up going, not during a holiday, was supposed to stay a couple of weeks, ended up staying for a couple of months. Him and the father were very attached, were very close, and it was kind of a weird relationship according to the wife. Or did she say, I felt he was getting too close? I don't know. There was a weird comment she made. And then there was starting to be some issues with the son and Jeffrey. And he was there for months.
So maybe he was bisexual, because we know he definitely loved women too. Or was he covering up? Because back in that day, that was a huge deal.
I feel like he was covering up because every single time he talked, he always immediately started going to his sex life. It was weird.
That's the only thing that ever came out. You would think more would come out if he was with men.
back then.
I don't
rem-
know, because it was illegal back then still.
Well, now, years later, they, yeah, would think
His
so.
ego.
Oh, have relationships.
Yeah,
They were,
yeah.
Maybe, but definitely a narcissist. And
Oh.
it wouldn't surprise me if he had a high psychopath level too on the scale.
He never showed any emotion ever.
Mm-mm.
well, actually,
I
he
never
did on
saw
weird things. It wasn't about the
Well, not the
family.
murders though.
Yeah, he had, I'll find it here. I highlighted it because there was a couple of times, but this last one I thought was so weird how it was during the grand jury possible whatever to see if they were going to go ahead and start the trial, but he was fine the whole time. He was angry, but fine the whole time, and then would start sobbing about something that's like, why are you crying about that? You never cry about your family, but you're crying about that.
Well, he did that interview with that late night talk show host, and
Yep.
and it freaked out one of the helpers that was her job, and she's like, he did it.
Yeah.
And he even laughed and said, well, that interview is what sparked Freddie as well to really amp up his efforts. And then the police decided to look at it again because of the way he was acting. Now, initially,
He did with the parents. He did one with the parents.
I never saw or heard of that one, but the one he did, Freddie knew he was lying about stuff. And Freddie Kassab at first thought he was innocent. There was no way. In fact, the parents knew him before Colette knew him, I believe. And they really liked him. And I've got some pictures of that put on the Instagram of like the mother dancing with him. She was pretty too.
Junior high, he would start to come over to the house and things like
Yeah.
that. So they were
And he even said, if I ever had another daughter, I'd still want the same son-in-law. They were absolutely broken by the murders. And Kassab funneled his grief into finding the killers, and he put up a $5,000 reward for information leading to the rest of the murders. And it's here that the now infamous Helena Stokely came into the picture. And what we know, especially from Wilderness of Error, so there's Helena Stokely, is that one of the cops, like Helena, was around a lot that area. And here's the sketch.
Yeah, they knew her.
And so it wouldn't surprise me if Jeffrey MacDonald had seen her, and possibly even that night. You know what I mean? So that whole thing from the start, I could see how she would have been the scapegoat. And then here's Freddie and Mrs. Kassab. Here's Jeffrey and Colette's wedding day. And then I found this picture of them when they were both really young.
But that Helena admitted that she'd been in the house and that happened, but it was foggy. She went back and forth
a lot.
But if you look at all the times she said that, she was being paid money. So we'll get into more of that in a bit. But a 22-year-old delivery man named William Posey said that he noticed his neighbor's car pull in at 4 a.m. the night of the murders when he was going to the bathroom. He saw the Mustang pull in and Helena with 2 to 3 males in the car. He said that Helena said 2 weeks later that she's going to have to leave town because police had been hassling her about the murders. She told them that the problem was she couldn't remember anything because she's so high on drugs, including LSD. Helena also wore blonde wigs and floppy hats regularly back to the murders. She never wore them again. Well, the CID agents, and especially Ivory, they already knew all about her. Yeah. At the time he called, they already knew. In fact, they'd already spoken with her. And she said she hadn't said anything useful except that she no longer had the floppy hat or wig. So, they paused on that. But she said she was sure she had never been in that house because she didn't even know where it was. It was so unhelpful that Agent Ivory didn't even take notes. And the colonel presiding over Article 32 hearing, he did want more investigation into her and recommended that civilian authorities investigate her further and see if they can find out anything about her role. I think that Posey just wanted the 5K, and he fingered his weird, spacey, drug addicted neighbor as the one that did it. But what do you think?
So one of the interesting things about when they were interviewing her is that they would ask her a question, and for instance, she would go, I don't know. Oh, okay. And he would just move on. Like she would just give an answer, maybe if she felt like it, and he would just move on. It was a very bad interview, very bad investigation to her.
And y'all said it was the Cavett show, right?
Yeah, Dick Cavett.
Okay. I wanted to play that in a minute.
And on that one, and I'm sure you'll mention this, but one of the things that struck me was that he immediately went into his ordeal and what was going on with him. It was an I thing, which again, we've seen that with the other.
Like Chris Watt, I need to see them again. This house isn't the same. I.
You can see Dick Cavett though in a few scenes.
Yeah.
Totally, you could tell that's crap.
Yes.
We didn't believe him at all.
So everything would have ended there. There was no evidence that they could for sure say pin on MacDonald. And I believe he would have gotten away with it if it wasn't for Freddie Kassab. Mm-hmm. So at this point, Mr. Kassab was enraged with the Army and its hounding of MacDonald. I mean, he thought these people are ridiculous. And so what he did is he set out to get to the bottom of the ordeal to help his son-in-law.
Well, and here's one thing about that I didn't know was that they were never told what happened. They had bare minimum information. Jeffrey MacDonald wouldn't talk about it. It wasn't being reported, the details or anything.
Yeah.
So whenever he went to bat for him, it was based on the person he knew, not any details.
Right.
And after the Dick Cavett show, that's when he actually got the details. And was
but even before the Cavett show, something was starting to bother him, and it was the transcript, because he had asked MacDonald several times for the transcripts of the hearings
to get details of the murders.
Right. And MacDonald kept putting him off for months and assured him that he and some Green Beret buddies had tracked down one of the killers and put him, quote, 6 feet under. But Kassab wouldn't be put off. And so he finally got the transcripts. Now, in the meantime, MacDonald immediately applied for an honorable discharge. He disposed of all of his family's possessions in a yard sale. He moved to New York. He began searching for a journalist to pay for his story while he socialized with Countess Christina Paolozzi. He also appeared on the Dick Cavett show, making wisecracks, no emotion at all. And he was so disturbing that one lady told Cavett that he did it. And his searching for a journalist and getting someone to write his book would come to bite him in the you-know-what later. But that's the book Fatal Vision. And the Wilderness of Error podcast, I don't know if it's called that. I think it might be what they go into that whole thing, how that journalist thought he was innocent and he was going to follow him around. And then he's like, the more he's around him, the more he sees things. He's like, man, this guy is as guilty as sin. And he didn't even tell Jeffrey he thought that. He just published the book.
I think the main thing that made him think that is really when he went to his apartment in Newport.
Mm-hmm.
Found that stuff. They made a movie of that book too.
So yeah, it's called Fatal Vision. So another thing, right before he could get the transcript, and Kassab was still going to bat for him, still trying to investigate, find people, find justice. He had met with a major magazine. Jeffrey MacDonald's attorney found out, and behind Kassab's back demanded a fee to be made to Jeffrey MacDonald for this interview. Kassab was super excited about the interview or the newspaper because they assured him that they had investigators on staff that would put FBI to shame. So he was excited to be able to properly investigate and find the people who murdered their family. MacDonald was like, because he taped every conversation. And he did that way before this too, by the way. But
Which
Jeffrey
was smart of the
MacDonald,
dad. Real smart of the dad.
Jeffrey MacDonald immediately called his attorneys. Within minutes, the attorney immediately called Kassab, told him to cease all interviews. It's like, and again, part of it was for money. They felt Jeffrey should have been paid money, but also, why would you stop investigation if you were that worried and concerned about finding the people who killed?
Then after he told them that they took care of one of the murders, it's like, okay, what are we in, Rambo? I mean, what the hell? And so he's like looking for reports of some, dude that was murdered and, disappeared. So he couldn't find anything. I think he even called some people.
I think a lot was his ego too, because a Green Beret, he mentioned that many times in interviews, that he was a Green Beret. So I think his ego is, oh, we'll find it and we'll take care of it.
So part of the killing of one of the individuals, he supposedly had broke his hand. Well, he didn't know he was being under surveillance, but Kassab did. So Kassab made that phone call and he's like, no.
That's
He's
right.
fully functioning, no
No
medical
broken
bills that he claimed was $2,000. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but Kassab, he gets the transcript and he goes over it with a fine tooth comb. And
You know how hard that would be.
Oh, I don't see how they do it.
But then on the love of a child or a parent or a sibling, it's just, you have to.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And plus, one thing Elena found out is that they had already lost all of their daughters prior to Colette.